Welcome to the Polgar Chess University. In this lesson, we shall focus in on captures. That's one of the most challenging tasks during a chess game, when to capture and which piece to capture and what to allow to your opponent to capture of your own pieces. So we're going to see 10 different examples examining the various captures or exchanges. Let's get started. Here we go. In this position, it is black's turn, and the question is, what should black do? The first thing you should be recognizing in the position, which, if any, pieces are under attack at the moment. So let's assume you're playing with the black pieces. You would have to notice that your queen right now on a4, highlighted with red, is under attack by white's pawn on b3. Also, at the same time, you would have to notice that your rook in the corner is also under attack by white's bishop. So it's quite important to always be aware of all the pieces that are under attack. Now, at the same time, also the white queen is under attack by black's knight on f4 as well as the bishop on h3. So this is a situation when a lot of things are hanging. Obviously, you would start with the most valuable piece that is under attack. So now that we understand that which of the pieces are hanging on both sides, let's try to get to it and figure out what's the best we can do on the black side. In this position, there is no way to actually win material. However, quite importantly, we want to avoid losing material. If black in this position would simply try to move his queen away out of harm's way, then white would not have the time to capture the rook in the corner because the queen is still attacked by black's knight. However, because the black knight on f4 is on an unprotected square, white will be able to gain material by giving a check with the bishop on e5, and then whether the black king moves out of that check and then the bishop can freely capture the knight on f4, or black first captures the bishop and then the queen captures back with a check. Things are getting even worse for black because now not only that the knight is attacked in addition to the king, but so is black's rook in the corner on h8, so black will face a real serious loss. Let's go back to the starting position and think what we should do. Obviously, when we have an option to capture a valuable piece like the queen compared to a bishop, typically we would choose the higher value piece, and this is no different. Black's best option right now is to capture the queen. Of course, white should not capture the knight on e2, but the much more valuable queen on a4. And now, black can trade the knight for the bishop, which typically is a good idea to do. And after pawn captures back on c3, all the clouds are gone, nothing more is hanging, and we have reached a pretty balanced endgame. In fact, I would slightly favor black. While there is a complete material balance right now on the board, black has a superior strategical position in the sense that white has an inferior pawn structure. What does that mean? It means that the white A pawns, both a2 and a4, are doubled up on the very same file, and therefore the second pawn on that same file is less productive than, let's say, black's connected pass pawns on independent files, because in white's case the two pawns are in each other's way. Let's move on to our next example. Here we go. In this complex position, Black has just moved his bishop to a6. Let's recognize what Black wants to do. Not very difficult. Black wants to capture White's queen. White needs to react to that to most likely move his queen out of the way or block the attack. Now the first thing to look at is, what can White capture? Well, there are quite a few things that White actually can capture in this position. One option is, obviously, the bishop, which is on an unprotected square. Another option is to capture the queen. And yet a third option is to capture the knight. I suggest you take a couple of minutes and try to study the situation for yourself. Which one would you choose? Then come back and see if you got it correctly. Well, sometimes you can work through eliminating some of the options and then being left with the one that works the best. So in this position, if White captures the bishop, which is the first thing to look at, since that was Black's last move, that would be a mistake, because that would allow for Black to capture White's rook. And as we know, a rook is more valuable than a bishop, being worth 5 points versus just 3 for a bishop. It's important to also see that if now White would follow up of capturing a second piece, the knight, then the Black queen would be happy to capture the bishop on c1, resulting in material gain for Black. Even though White can avoid the immediate checkmate by blocking it with the queen, Black's material advantage is quite clear. Let's go back again to our starting position. Let's see how it would work out if we would trade queens and then capture the knight on d5. It's true that White has temporarily gained material, but indeed it's very temporary because Black can gain right away back the knight by capturing on f3. While White can balance the material with rook takes pawn, Black would have a slightly more active position after the following move, as White is still undeveloped on the queen side of the board. So going back again to the starting position, we already recognized that queen takes bishop would result in simply losing material right away. Trading queens would win a pawn, but still result in a comfortable position for Black. And then, let's see, last but not least, what happens after the queen captures the knight. Now, here the real important aspect is that this very last move for White is a check. If it were not a check, then Black, just like after queen takes bishop, could capture White's rook on b1. But since it is a check, Black has no choice but react to that and therefore cannot avoid the exchange of queens. For example, after queen takes queen and the rook takes queen, we can see that White has an extra knight, which is quite a significant advantage. Let's move on to our next example. And here again we can see the queens hanging. That certainly requires our attention, and we cannot just make a normal developing move, let's say castling. When we're in a situation that we're able to capture our opponent's queen, it's certainly the first thing to investigate. In this case, capturing the queen is certainly not a bad move, although it misses a much better opportunity. Right now, White would be capturing Black's queen with a check, and then when knight captures bishop, rook captures bishop, there is again material balance with an approximately equal position. Going back again, let's see for black, is there anything better that black can do than settle for that equal position? In this case, black has a very simple but effective move, namely to interpose to white's attack on black's queen by playing b5. Now, not only that the black queen no longer is attacked, while white queen still is, black also created a fork, attacking the white bishop and knight at the same time, giving black a significant advantage. If white would want to do a similar idea of playing f3 and saving his own queen while counterattacking the enemy bishop, black would simply retreat from this attack while maintaining the fork on the white bishop and knight. White here cannot avoid losing one of his two minor pieces. Let's move on to the next example. Here we go. In this position, black has just moved his bishop to g4, attacking white's queen. What should white do? Well, the first, most obvious move would be to move the queen out of the attack, for example, to c2 or d2. Then you may consider blocking the attack by pushing the pawn up from f2 to f3. Those are all reasonable choices. However, any of those options would clearly miss the winning opportunity. As I always like to say, always be aware of all your checking and capturing options. You never know when it would result in a significant gain. Therefore, you always need to check them out. In this case, you may consider queen taking the bishop if you noticed that the black knight is in a pin. However, the knight is not in an absolute pin, just in a relative pin, which means that the knight is allowed to move even though then a piece behind it will be falling. However, that piece is not the king. So if knight takes, bishop takes, black will be able to capture back and maintain the material balance. What other capture may white try? Well, there is a better one, and that is bishop capturing the knight on f6. What happens now is white has removed the knight from f6, the very same knight that was giving protection to black's bishop on g4. Now, if queen or bishop captures back on f6, the white queen will capture the black bishop on g4, gaining a bishop. Black would also lose a piece after bishop takes queen, and white is already a bishop ahead. If either black rook captures the white bishop, white will do the same, capturing the black bishop on d1, or if the bishop runs away, even worse, because the white bishop will run away by capturing the pawn on c7. Let's move on to our next example. Here we go. Well, the position did not change much, but still did quite importantly. As you can see, the white king right now is on f2 and not in its safety zone on g1 as it was in the previous example. And that results in a major difference. I always like to point out that in chess, paying attention to detail is extremely important, just like in life. Now, for example, if white would try the same operation that worked in a previous example, that is, bishop captures knight, here it would be suicidal, because the black queen would capture back, giving a check to the white king, and then after king moves out of the check, bishop takes queen, rook takes queen, pawn takes rook, rook takes bishop, would result in a 2-point gain for black. As you can see now, black has a second rook which white no longer has, versus a bishop, and the difference in value between the rook and the bishop is 2 points. Well, that's great if you can understand what not to do, but it does not yet automatically gives you the solution of what you should do. Well, in this case, white cannot do anything fancy or special to gain something, but simply needs to make a quiet and peaceful move by moving the queen away from the attack to c2. The reason why to c2, because white creates a battery between the white queen and light square bishop, and specifically threatening to capture black's pawn on h7. While black can defend against that, but the game goes on and white has a slight advantage because white still has both bishops on the board and already created a pin over the black knight. Much better than losing material, which would occur after bishop takes f6. Let's go to our next example. Here we go. Again, pretty similar as we've seen before, but there are significant differences again. In this example, capturing bishop takes knight again would not be the right way to go. Here, black would be able to simply recapture with a knight, maintaining protection on black's bishop on g4. Instead, the simple bishop takes bishop is the correct answer, because here the black knight is pinned. If black would want to capture the white bishop, that would be really a bad idea, because black would lose the queen while white wouldn't. After bishop g4, if black would respond by playing h6, attacking white's other bishop, the bishop would have to make sure not to retreat on this diagonal, because then there would be no longer a pin situation and black would just capture the bishop. However, after h6, white could simply exchange bishop for knight and then move away the other bishop, keeping the extra piece for white. Let's move on. Here we go. In this endgame, again there are options to capture different things. First thing, you need to notice which are the hanging pieces. And you'll see that the black bishop is hanging, but so is the white bishop. What should white do in this situation? White has an option to make an intermediate move by moving the bishop to h7 with a check. It's true that white is giving up a bishop for a pawn. However, in view that on the following move white is ready to capture black's bishop, it's certainly not a bad idea. In fact, it wins a pawn. However, remember, when you see a good option, look around and see if you have an even better one. In this case, it would be premature to stop the calculation after each side captures the bishop, and you'd have to notice that there is a second piece to capture for your side. White, in this case, won an entire 3-point valued piece. Certainly the best choice in our starting position. If white would simply move the bishop away to a safe square, that would be far too slow, giving black the opportunity to move his own bishop away from the attack and keep an approximate balance. Let's move on. Here we go. In this tricky situation, it is white's turn, and white has option to capture various things as well as to create a pin. If right now white were to capture the black rook, it would not be a great idea because it wouldn't result in any kind of gain. Black would simply recapture and be just fine. It would be even worse to try to create a pin on the black rook on f7 because it would allow black to capture our rook first and then after bishop takes, if you look, you will see that black is the one up a bishop, compared to the starting position that had a complete material balance. On the other hand, bishop takes bishop simply would result in a gain for white, because if now rook takes rook, then bishop captures rook with a check, leaves white with an extra bishop. It's worth pointing out that capturing that same rook with our rook instead would be a major mistake, even though it seems just fine at the first glance. Right now, black would be able to keep attacking our bishop on g6, and if it goes on this diagonal, then the rook would be just lost, and in turn, if the bishop would move to h5, trying to hang on to the rook, black would be continuing to attack that bishop and save the game that way. If pawn protects, black can simply capture the bishop, resulting a drawish endgame. Let's see the next example. Here we go. In this position, black can capture 3 different white pieces: the bishop, the knight, or the rook. Try to think which would be your number 1 choice. Capturing the bishop on d3 is not a bad choice, but not the best either. Now, white would capture the black rook, and black would capture a second piece on e4 with a check. Would give black some little minimal gain by capturing a bishop and a knight, which equals to 6 points, versus giving up only a 5-point piece. However, it's not the best choice. Capturing the knight with a check first, with the idea of then capturing the rook next, it's a good idea, but it doesn't work, because white would recapture also with a check. And in fact, this would be a very bad choice, because then after black reacts to the check, the rook is lost on f8. The best choice is the simple rook takes rook, because the white knight is pinned, and therefore black's rook on f6 is completely safe. And here is our final example for this lesson. In this position, white can capture several things. You need to calculate for c just a couple of moves ahead in order to make the right choice. If you would try to capture the most valuable piece you can in this position by rook takes rook, you would have to see that black would capture your rook as well, and therefore that would be a simple exchange of rooks. On the other hand, if you capture the less valuable knight, allowing black to capture your rook, you would come out ahead, because then you would capture black's rook on d8, gaining material advantage. Well, I hope you got a little better idea about different captures and value of pieces and how to foresee what's coming, at least for a move or two ahead. Thank you for listening, and be back next week for some more chess knowledge. Bye-bye.